It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. She is my co-chair on the board. She is a person who I have gotten to know and love and found that she has more energy than I will ever have in my entire life. Carmen was born in Puerto Rico. She grew up in Harlem, New York. She's a graduate of the City University of New York with a master's degree in education. And among her many accomplishments, Carmen was the founding director of the Women's Building in San Francisco, helped found the Lavender Youth Recreation Information Center in San Francisco, and the LGBT Health and Human Services Network, a coalition of over 55 organizations and groups in New York advocating for LGBT health and human services. She was the founding principal author of Causes in Common, a national coalition of reproductive justice and LGBT liberation activists, and during her tenure as public policy director at the LGBR Community Center in New York City. She's been honored for her activism and community intellectual contributions by the City University of New York School of Law with an honorary law degree in 2005. So be careful, she knows the law. The Sophia Smith Collection at Smith College in Massachusetts, Voices of Feminism Project, conducted an oral history of her in 2005, and her papers are at the Sophia Smith Archives. She is my co-chair. She is a dynamite speaker and an energetic person who I hope you will love as much as I do. Carmen Vázquez.
So Joan, thanks for the little step stool.
I just inspired it.
I know, but it's great to have. Actually, it's a little high, but that's okay. So I look tall for once. Thank you, Hardy. I thank the entire board of Woodhall, our fabulous volunteers, all of you for being here, for getting up to come to listen to me, and our sponsors, which you see scrolling on the screen. We couldn't do this without them, and we deeply appreciate their contributions. Before I actually begin, I want to confess to you that, when I get asked to speak, I usually just do whatever I want to do. I pick the topic, usually around social justice or, race and class and sexual orientation, sex issues. But this year, I didn't get to pick, I was told. And I said, okay, you are going to talk about human rights, capital H, capital R, human rights. And so that will be the focus of my presentation. I thank you for coming. I want to take a moment to honor the Appomattox people, the Chesapeake people, the Manahoac people, and all the other Native people on whose land we stand. Land that belonged to them and was forcibly taken from them by European invaders. This was their land. I honor Jeff Montgomery and those no longer with us who gave their lives to the struggle for sexual freedom and justice. Jeff was a huge part of Woodhall's beginnings and thinking and activism for many years. He was a friend. I miss him. Their spirit, his and their spirit, lives on in us and the work we do to advance justice. One disclaimer before I really begin. I am not an expert on human rights. I am an activist that embraces human rights. There are people here who can do much more to explain them than I am capable of, and at least 3 of them will be here on Sunday. I look forward to that plenary. Think long and hard about the questions that you have about human rights. Do write them down on those little cards. And be prepared for a great plenary on Sunday as well. What I am offering instead is my belief that human rights are the aspirational flame of freedom and justice. I believe that human rights ideology and practice need to be the frame for all our struggles for freedom, justice, and human dignity. I'm going to do my best to explain why, but first a little bit more about me. My bio that Hardy shared with you tells you a little bit about my accomplishments as an activist and an organizer. It doesn't tell you who I am. I am the oldest daughter of Puerto Rican migrants Carmen Vázquez and Jorge Claudiver Vázquez. I love my father's middle name. Who has a name like Claudiver? I am Titi to 7 biological nieces and nephews and great Titi to 8 nieces and nephews. I am also Titi to Clive and Evelyn, children from my family of choice, whom some of you have heard of before and who were supposed to join me today, but sadly could not. I love you, Clive and Evelyn, even if you're not here. I grew up on welfare in New York City's East Side and the General Grant projects in Black Harlem. I went to Catholic school, and although I left the organized religion many, many, many years ago, I retained the values of love and faith and hope that are foundational to that religion and remain the foundation of what has shaped my vision of human rights and my activism. At 5, I first envisioned that I and was determined to become the captain of the rocket ship. Don't ask what rocket ship, I just imagined a rocket ship. I first kissed a girl when I was 6 years old. I am a proud graduate of the City University of New York, where I began my activist life organizing against the war in Vietnam, against nuclear proliferation. I had to stop for a second, that's a hard word to say, proliferation. And for Puerto Rican independence. I thought I was destined to become a professor of American literature, but as you can see, I saw a fork in the road and I took it. My life in San Francisco, where I spent 20 years, was shadowed by the anguish and agony of the thousands of gay brothers lost to AIDS, while Reagan turned a blind eye to our despair. I have been blessed by the love and care of some beautiful, smart, and very sexy women. I am a survivor of sexual abuse. I am a Puerto Rican butch lesbian socialist and proud of it. Thank you. And then, before I get into a little bit of history on human rights, I want to, by a show of hands, how many of you are Summit virgins? Well, look at that. There's a whole lot of new people. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And then just put up your hand if you are able. How many years? 2 years, 3 years? Okay. So we've got some pros, 10 years. We've got some pros in the room and some newbies. Please make sure to talk to each other so you can share experience about past summits and enjoy this one together. So, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There's a group here, or will be here, at the Human Rights Network. Is that right, Ricky? Yes. And this is a copy, I carry it with me all the time actually, of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You should get to know it. Hopefully they will have some booklets available for all of you to be able to get to know them a little bit better. But the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on December 10th, 1948. Which is a month and 3 days before my birthday. So I kind of have an affinity to it. And a lot of us use the term human rights without necessarily referring to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights because we sort of know it in our bones. I call that sort of lowercase HR. What I want to help guide you through is uppercase human rights. The document itself was largely a product of Western thought led by Eleanor Roosevelt, wife of Franklin, and, in my opinion, the more accomplished of the Roosevelts. I'm biased. She chaired the UN committee charged with drafting the document and was joined by many others, including John Humphrey, a Canadian lawyer, and René Cassin of France, and Mahatma Gandhi of India. The history of thought that led to its creation, however, was decidedly not just Western. It includes efforts to encode human rights protections that go back to Cyrus, Egypt, Islam, the English Magna Carta, the U.S. Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, and several Geneva Conventions. It is a very, very old universal aspiration to be treated equally, to be free of tyranny, to live with dignity. And so, why talk about it here? Well, human rights, the whole point of this summit is that we proclaim and defend sexual freedom as a human right. And so all of our work revolves around a commitment to lifting up human rights. In the United States and most of the world, our laws are framed by civil rights, not human rights. The struggle and history of attaining equality through civil rights is long, honorable, and written with blood and tears. And civil rights is not enough. For strategic and practical purposes, we need to retain and expand laws that prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, and national origin. We need to protect the right to marriage and family identity and national origin. We need to protect the right to a woman's right to her reproductive destiny and control over her body. We need to use any and all means necessary in order to secure our right to participate in U.S. society as equals. And the question I always ask is, equal to whom? Right? Ultimately, victories, past and present victories on civil rights and equality, and future ones, only assure us of our right to participate if we behave properly and don't offend the sensibilities of those who have been granted the right, of those whom we have been granted the right to be equal to. Right? It always starts there. It does not assure us that the society we have the right to participate in is worth a damn. It does not assure universal health care, housing for our homeless, services for our youth and elders, protection for our sex workers, or an end to the violence that is poverty. I have devoted the better part of my life to fighting for civil rights and justice. The struggle for legal equality is not yet over, as my transgender sisters and brothers, our immigrants, and our sex worker colleagues can attest to. I'm not here to suggest that we abandon that struggle. I'm here to challenge us to think of civil rights and equality as a means to an end, but not the end. I'm here to try and get at civil rights as a step toward the justice that eludes so many of us. I'm here to ask that we think beyond the limits of protected legislation in a capitalist society that will never, ever place freedom and justice above profit. And you know that. So, why human rights? Well, because 141 years after the passage of the 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, Black Americans remain disproportionately in poverty, incarcerated, and the target of police violence. Because 55 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, transgender women and men are still not deemed worthy of its protections, at least by some people. Because the genocide in Rwanda was fueled in part by U.S. arms and our government's refusal to acknowledge the genocide. Because Iraq and its weapons of mass destruction that led to the death of thousands upon thousands was a lie. Because Donald Trump. So I don't need to, and I never refer to him as my president or the president. You should just know that. It's even on my Facebook thing, not my president. And you know that there's no question that this administration is hell-bent on rolling back legislative protections for lesbians, gay and bisexual people, transgender people, the right of all women to reproductive justice, the right of immigrants and asylum seekers to due process. Whatever progress we have made on the racial justice front, whatever progress we have made on the environmental justice front, whatever hope we once had for a more just healthcare system is all under attack by this administration. Because civil rights and equality can be given to us and they can be taken away from us. And also, some of you will say, what's the point of human rights? They are aspirational, they are not law. And yes, they are largely aspirational in the United States, although some of us do the work to make them not be aspirational. But so was equality aspirational for many, 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 and is still for many more. Despite their limitations, those aspirations have given millions respite, if not justice. Imagine if slaves had not aspired to be free men and women. Imagine if women had not aspired to vote. Imagine if Ruth Bader Ginsburg had never taken on a sex discrimination case. Imagine if LGBT people had not aspired to equality, had not formed communities, had not aspired to fight sodomy laws, or aspire to marriage equality. Imagine if Langston Hughes and James Baldwin or Nora Zale Hurston had not been free to write. Imagine if Serena Williams and Megan Rapinoe had never had the opportunity to pick up a tennis racket or kick a soccer ball. Aspirations matter, none more so than those embodied in the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When I say that human rights are the aspirational frame of justice, I mean this. Justice is more than the absence of discrimination. Justice is an equitable distribution of our planet's resources and not the plundering of those resources for profit. Justice is a conscious preservation of those resources because the earth belongs to all of us. Justice is the unfettered realization of our potential as human beings. Justice is the freedom to love whom we wish to love, to have sex with whom we want to have sex any way we want to have sex. Justice is the right to universal health care. Justice is the right to be treated with dignity and as equals. Justice is the right to family. Justice is the right to the sovereignty of our bodies. Justice is the right to family. Justice is the right to safety and shelter. Justice is the right to work. Justice is the right to autonomy and joy. If you actually read the 30 articles, original articles of the Universal Declaration of Rights, you will find those rights delineated in its 30 articles and subsequent amendments. Here we go. In my right hand, I have the Constitution of the United States, written 240 years ago and witnessed by 36 white propertied men, most of whom were slave owners. My left hand, I have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, written by people from all over the world about 70 years ago, 71 years ago, if my counting is correct. We need to rewrite the one on my right to reflect the one on my left. Okay? That's what we need to do. We need to move beyond the era of civil rights and become the people who led the way to encoding human rights as constitutional law. Now, that's a big deal. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But first, let me tell you what it means. I lived in San Francisco from 1974 until 1994. I was witness to the devastation that was the AIDS pandemic in its early years. I saw men in the prime of their lives, in their late 20s, early 30s, waste away. I saw men in walkers and bent on canes whom only a year before were dancing with abandon to Donna Summers and every disco diva known and beloved by them. By 1990, there were 100,000 reported cases of AIDS in the United States, mostly among gay men. 14,000 of them died between 1980 and 1990. And through it all, Ronald Reagan's administration did nothing. Smug in the belief that this was a gay plague. It was called GRID, Gay-Related Immunodeficiency Syndrome, or something like that, if you don't remember, but it was called that. The LGBT struggle to demand treatment, prevention, and a cure for AIDS was fueled by desperation, but also by grace and courage, because they knew, and we should know, that health care is a human right, not a privilege. When I was 12 years old, on a very hot and oppressively humid day in August, let me tell you, New York City in August can be really stinky and awful. My mother sent me to take care of her friend who was sick, she said. I went to her apartment. I found Margarita in her bedroom on a bedsheet soaked in blood and sweat. I was overwhelmed. I went to the window and I threw up. I put cold rags on her head and held her hand because I didn't know what else to do. Margarita had just induced an abortion because she couldn't afford or find a doctor to perform the procedure. When my mother got to her, she helped Margarita to the shower, rolled up the bed sheets and whatever was in them, and threw them in a trash bag. And I watched. Reproductive justice and freedom are human rights. In 2018, advocates tracked at least 26 deaths of transgender people in the United States. 2019 has seen another 15 or more transgender people fatally shot or killed by other violent means. Most of the victims were transgender black women. Many were sex workers. Article 3 of the Declaration of Human Rights states, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work. Everyone. On July 17, 2014, Eric Gardner died in New York City in the borough of Staten Island when police officer Daniel Pantaleo put him in a chokehold, an illegal chokehold. He died while repeatedly saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Officer Pantaleo was recently absolved of all charges in his civil trial. Eric Gardner's crime was selling loose cigarettes on the sidewalk. Black Lives Matter formed in the wake of his death. There have been countless other incidents of death by police violence all across the country. I'm sure you're familiar with them since then. Article 7 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, all are equal before the law and entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. Under Eric Gardner was not. Under the spiteful, racist, and misogynist rule of Donald Trump, immigrant families have been torn apart, literally. Children have been put in cages for months at a time. You've seen the news. Reunification has been painfully slow, and thousands of children and their parents remain in detention. Their crime? An attempt to seek asylum in the United States and escape violence in their countries of origin. The right to asylum is a human right. I could go on and on and on. I don't have that kind of time. There are workshops to attend later on, but you get my drift. There is no struggle to end all the things that we've been talking about. No struggle for social justice that we engage in that is not framed by human rights. And I know that a lot of you are thinking, yeah, right, human rights is constitutional in the United States. That's a lovely thought, Carmen, but it can't be done. And I say can't is not an operative word for me. It wasn't for Harriet Tubman or Frederick Douglass or the activists who stood up to the dogs and water hoses in demand of civil rights, or the women who won the right to vote, or Cesar Chavez and his farm workers, or the LGBT warriors who stood up to the police and rioted at Stonewall in New York City. Can't wasn't an operative word for the LGBT men and women who chained themselves to the Health and Human Services building in demand for AIDS treatment and prevention. Can't is not an operative word for Black Lives Matter, to our reproductive justice warriors, to our transgender warriors, to our sex workers, demanding their profession be decriminalized and that their right to work be honored because it is a human right. Donald Trump basked in his glory at a rally in Greenville, North Carolina, not too long ago. I think it was in June. And the crowd chanted, "Send her back, send her back, send her back." They were referring to his attack on 4 U.S. Congresswomen, all women of color, whom he charged with being un-American and told them to go back to the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came. 3 of the Congresswomen were born in the United States. The 4th, Representative Ilhan Omar, was born in Somalia and became a U.S. citizen in 2000. The chant was intended for her. Congresswoman Omar's response? In a New York Times article, she wrote, "The rally will be a defining moment in American history and underscores what is at stake in next year's election. This fight is not merely about policy ideas, it is a fight for the soul of our nation. The ideals at the heart of our founding, equal protection under the law, pluralism, and religious liberty are all under attack, and it is up to all of us to defend them." There is no can't in her gracious and eloquent rebuttal. And it is indeed up to all of us to defend the ideals at the heart of our founding and to go beyond them. Now, I'm not naive. I am 70 years old. I know that rewriting the Constitution of the United States is likely something that will happen after I die. But it can happen. And there is much we can and must do right now to pave the way for a future where it can be our reality as citizens of the earth. During the 2016 elections, many of us said that it was the most important election in our lifetime. It was, and we lost. In 2020, it will be even more important, and we must win. If we are to defend our democracy and the civil liberties and rights we have won in the last century and move beyond them to human rights, we must win. This is not an election any of us can afford to sit out. Who is president matters. It fucking matters. Too many people said, I don't know. It matters. We must leave no stone unturned. Volunteer to get out the vote in swing states if you are able. Give money if you can afford to. Do phone banks, go to rallies. Give it all you have. We can defeat Donald Trump. We can defeat Donald Trump and send him back to his lurid world and out of our lives. We can attain universal health care as a human right, not a privilege. We can enact a humane and just immigration and asylum policy and protect the pluralism white supremacists, led by Donald Trump, are so afraid of. We can enact a humane, we can ensure equality for our transgender sisters and brothers. We can decriminalize the sex work profession because sex workers have a right to work. We can protect the right of all women to determine their reproductive lives. We can help keep black men out of prison. We can work to eradicate poverty. We can continue to heal and protect the planet. But it begins with this election. Do everything you can. And to keep doing it, I know that we first must believe that we can. Step one. We must believe in the power of transformative justice, some of you heard of, for our wounded communities. We must believe in each other and support each other. We must do more calling in and less calling out. We must love more. We must continue the effort to hear each other as people with different and shared experiences of violence and pain, of hunger and fear and the denial of opportunity, justice and joy. We must commit ourselves to the development of strategies for freedom and justice that coalesce the different strains of our movement and not work in silos. To actions and strategies that both take us into the bowels of our decaying system in pursuit of civil and democratic rights, but also strategies that lead us beyond them by any and all means necessary in the pursuit of freedom, justice, and human rights. We must embrace and elevate our dreams. We must see the light through the darkness. There is light in the 4 congresswomen Donald Trump insulted. There is light in the laughter of our children. There is light in the embrace of lovers, no matter how old or young they are. There is light in our sexual passions and desires. There is light in this room. The darkness that are Donald Trump and the excesses of corrupt capitalist culture cannot kill the light. We need to keep looking for it. I want to share a journal entry from, I think it was around 1984, that goes, I want to realize the possibility of playing with double-scoop, chubby, chocolate-fisted kids who grow up loving the boy and the girl in themselves. I want to live in a country that assures warm beds and warm meals on cold, damp mornings for everyone, everywhere, every day. I want to run the edge of a blade across my lover's breast and free her of her bra in one clean move as we make love under a silver night moon in the Arizona desert. Yeah. I want to catch fat trout in the clean running waters when the mountains sing the morning. I want to work on the election of an African-American bush lesbian from Louisiana to the Senate of the United States. I dream of being alive for the cure to AIDS. I dream of the day when Puerto Rico is a free and sovereign nation. I dream of claiming my birthright to citizenship in that nation. Some Puerto Ricans in the room, yeah? I dream of having the health and strength to enjoy a martini in front of a roaring fire in the embrace of my family when I'm 84 or 94. Some of my dreams have been realized, some not. And whether they are realized or not doesn't really matter. I'm a warrior for freedom, justice, and human rights because I believe in my dreams, because I see the light that is human rights through the darkness of our time, because I believe that we must move beyond equality to justice and human rights, or we will not survive as a species. Thank you. I hope that you will embrace your own dreams and aspirations. I hope you will find reason this weekend and beyond to embrace human rights as the core values of our common struggle for a better and more just tomorrow. Ditch the can't and repeat after me. Sí se puede. Yes, we can. 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 One last time with energy. Sí se puede. Yes, we can. Thank you. You've been a great audience. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You really were wonderful to share my thoughts with. And we have about 15 minutes. If you would like to have some more conversation, ask questions, comments, or you can just go and have your coffee and get on with your day.
Does anyone have a question?
There is a microphone. Chad has it.
You answered every question?
Yeah, I guess so, except hers.
Good morning there, Gabrielle Monroe, she, her. I want to thank you for standing up there and talking on behalf of sex worker rights.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. That means everything.
You're welcome.
This isn't so much a question, but just a comment. There's, I think her name is Glendon, the Leonard Hand Chair of Law at Harvard University, is heading a commission for the Department of State, Pompeo, that is reviewing unalienable rights to figure out which ones we get to keep, which ones we can throw away, what is an unalienable.
Inalienable.
Thank you. And so they're actually attacking the idea that there are rights that we all have, at least rights that we all have as human beings rather than as Americans. So just as things are always worse than you might think they are until they get better. Thank you, Carmen. It was wonderful.
You're welcome. And hopefully they will figure it out. We're working on it. In the back.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk this morning. I have a question that I think I'm going to be asking a lot of people throughout the rest of this conference, because it's something I'm very interested in hearing people's responses to. At the end of the day, unfortunately, we do live in a capitalist society. How do we what are your suggestions for funding and finding the money to keep this movement moving? Because obviously crowdsourcing can only go so far. I know for my friends, we're all passing the same $5 through Cash App to each other. Like it's nobody has any money, so community group sourcing isn't really a sustainable method. Even though people will obviously dig deep into their pockets to give to things they believe in, at the end of the day, it's the same $5. So how do we get access to the resources to continue the amazing work that you've been doing for so many years?
Well, that's a tough question and a long answer. I mean, first of all, money is neutral, right? The money is not the problem. The system is the problem. And at Woodhull, we're very cognizant of how difficult it is to secure funding to do the work that we do. And that's why we keep asking you to, do the little envelopes with whatever you can. But ultimately, I think the answer is in continuing to find people who believe in what we believe. That, there are some corporations, foundations who are just not going to fund sexual freedom as a human right, no matter how much you pitch to them. But there are those that will. Tides is a foundation. They are one of our sponsors. They believe in the work that we're doing. So, constantly looking for people who believe in what you believe, in what we believe, and are willing to give of their resources is essential. Community funding efforts are, you said not sustainable, but I think that they are a part of the solution. I think that we need to find ways to continue to support people, whether it be the woman who lost her job, the sex worker who's not making enough to make ends meet. We need to take money out of our own pockets, if we have it, to support those people. And finally, I think that, no fundraising effort is ever successful without a plan. And we at Woodhull are also cognizant of that, and constantly working on devising a plan that will make us more sustainable. But it's a very slow process that begins with relationships, building relationships, finding people who share your values, and asking them to step forward and support you. But it means you have to ask. And that's the other thing. I think that, and why it's a long answer, a lot of us are really stuck on shame or whatever. We're queasy about asking for money. It's not polite. It's like, not talking about politics or religion at the family dinner. We don't like to ask for money because we're embarrassed about it. And that is something that we all sort of have a little bit of, and we need to work to get rid of that shame around asking for what we need, including money. Thank you for your question. Okay, I think they're ready for coffee. Thank you.